The global pandemic has changed wine marketing forever, and the old ways of reaching the trade aren't as efficient or effective as they once were. If you're a producer or region looking to reach more people with less effort and have been affected by travel restrictions and uncertainty, register for one of my upcoming free wine marketing digital roundtables at interpretingwine.com/roundtable. I'm Lawrence Francis, host of Interpreting Wine, the place to learn from thought leaders in the world of wine and marketing. Welcoming you to the London Somm Special series. We continue our exploration of all things wine in the company of Shane McHugh, Group Wine Buyer at Goodman Restaurant Holdings Ltd, covering Goodman, Zelman Meats and Beast Restaurants. In a glorious, free-flowing episode, we first hear some of his influences across a now 15-year career in hospitality. He then gives us an overview of the Goodman Restaurant Group, before diving into a couple of the facets that make it special, talking his attitude to wine training, and also how he got excited for steak and wine pairing, before focusing in on a couple of wines that Shane specially chose for the episode. Both are fantastic examples of the diversity that can be found in California wines. Goodman especially being very well known for its California wine selection. Before he brings it all together, discussing his legacy in the hospitality industry. Enjoy.
Originally from the west of Ireland, born in Castlebar, County Mayo, but then grew up in Roscommon. I moved to Castlerea in County Roscommon when I was very young, because that's where both my parents are from. My dad is from Castlerea town and my mother's from Roscommon town. Just grew up there. Best childhood ever. Most amazing parents, most amazing family. Like, absolutely no complaints. Absolutely spoiled to death. Really, really great upbringing. I fell in love with hospitality at a very young age. I started working in hospitality when I was about 13. It's weird to say because I'm not even 30 yet and I've almost had a 15-year career in hospitality, which is a strange thing to say, but here we are anyway. So I started by recycling glass bottles out the back of the hotel my two brothers were working in. One of them was running the bar at the time. He moved on to a new hotel, which was quite a big opening at the time considering it was the west of Ireland, and I ended up there. I was there for 5 years. Then the big thing came of college. What was I going to do? All of that kind of stuff. I wanted to be a journalist. I was really into that. I love sports and I love music, and I especially like the written word about both, because the history of those things are quite fascinating as well as what's going on in the present. The Irish education system and how people are deemed to get into college is a bit like an allocation. Sometimes a bottle shows up and you're like, what? Why? So I didn't get that course, so fair enough. And I ended up doing a course in hospitality. Fáilte Ireland, who are the hospitality board in the Republic of Ireland, were doing an incentive where if you did a hospitality course of any kind in certain colleges, you paid no fees. So I literally got a €10,000 education for nothing. Yeah. And not only that, I got a €10,000 education at what I think is the best hospitality college in Ireland by a long, long way. Which was the Galway Mayo Institute of Technology on the Dublin Road in Galway. I'd say there is when it started with wine. My love of hospitality, I think is very much within me. I think I fell in love with it because of my parents, because our house is a very sociable house. We always have guests, we always have people dropping in, dropping out, dropping down, whatever, depending on what liquid we've given them. And it was particularly my mother, because she's so good at reading people and reading the room. Like that, she had that amazing ability and still has it to this day, of when that person sits down on our couch, she'll say, "Do you want a cup of tea?" Another time be like, "Well, you'll have a vodka and tonic." It's just, and she just has this amazing ability. Dad does too, to his credit. And that's where it really came from. So, and I think ultimately, considering where I am today in places like in Goodman, Zelman and Beast, it's all three of them, particularly Goodman, have a very homely atmosphere. So I think that's kind of what drew me here ultimately. So, did my hospitality degree. I did a Bachelor of Business in Bar and Restaurant Management. In there, I had a wine module, and my lecturer was a lady by the name of Elizabeth Fox. She's my hero. She is the one that made me want to do this. Just everything about her, just the way she conducted herself, the knowledge she had, the presence she had, the personality she had. I just remember thinking, I want to be all of those things. And I just really got drawn into it. And as luck would have it, it ended up being my best module in college. That was my best grade. And I was kind of thinking, okay, so it's just all throughout, it was just this real snowball effect. And then at the end of my college time, they had a really good relationship with some kind of members-based beach clubs in the United States. There was one on Long Island who I'd interviewed for the previous year, but I literally got there just too late as all the jobs had gone. And they said, we promise we'll take you next year. And I was like, oh yeah, I've heard that before. And sure enough, I got an email the following year saying, do you want to come? So I said, cool, I'll come. And then when I got to New York, that's when the wine thing really started. Because in advance of the season, the members used to send wines for the season. And I'll tell you, not a bottle of Blossom Hill in sight. Like, members were sending back vintages of Opus 1. I remember one member in particular sent 12 times 12 of 2005 Caymus Cabernet Reserve, like to the roof. And he was like, oh yeah, that should last me the summer. And I was like, okay. Yeah, and then because I did the wine module in college and I did have an interest in it and people that I was working with there knew it, I kind of ended up getting dragged into it a small bit. So I was like, okay. And then I signed up for Guild Somm, and then I just started studying and all that kind of stuff. Visa came to an end and I came home, and I also came home to graduate, and I did that. And then I sat there and I thought, I have this degree, I don't want to be a bar manager and I don't want to be a restaurant manager. What do I do? So I had a chat with Liz, and I said, this sommelier thing, this sounds cool. And it's still one of the nicest things anyone's ever said to me, when she said, you're about as capable as anyone has ever had in terms of a student. She was like, how fast you've picked this up. She said it was unbelievable. Because so we had a mock restaurant over 2 floors. The one downstairs was for when you were in first year, and then the second one was like the grown-up one. This is like, this is like white tablecloths, all that kind of stuff. And I remember she said, here's the list of wines that we have that we can serve in the restaurant. And like, it was a training restaurant, so everything was sold at cost anyway. So a meal in there was tremendous value. And someone would get sent in every week to do the wine 1 week. I'm not blowing smoke, but I don't know, I just got into a real buzz of it. Like, one person sold 1 glass one night, one person sold 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I went into that restaurant that first night, and when I left, everybody was drinking wine. I think I did, it was like 28 covers, and I did 28 glasses of wine. And I just remember going on the other side of the door and going, oh, that was so cool. That was so much fun. And then just loads of different instances like that just kind of kept coming up again. And I just thought, you know what? I'll give it a go. So I knew I was going to move back to London anyway. My brother Martin was already over here, and he said, hospitality is booming, you should really come back and do it because it's a great time. And he was right. And ironically, we're working together at the minute. He works for Goodman also. So, we're always paralleling and come together. But I gave it a go. I interviewed in a bazillion different places, and I ended up going to work in Vinoteca at their site in Marylebone. It was a very fleeting experience, but I learned a lot in that time. Brett and Charlie do really cool things there. And the managers there, Ida Henriksen was her name, and Maya Brown, who was her assistant. They were amazing, and they taught me so much in that short time. And then out of nowhere, I get an email from Lord Patrick saying, what are you doing? I was like, well, I'm working for these guys. And then she was like, I'm doing this new project. It's a tapas-based restaurant, but it's going to be a pretty killer wine list. It was her baby, and it was her concept. So I was like, okay, cool. So went to work for her, and that was really kind of the next level. In terms of learning, I did, while I was there, I did my introductory and certified sommelier with the Court of Master Sommeliers when I was there.
Social wine and tapas.
When I was there, yeah. So picked up a lot of knowledge, opened a lot of great wine in the time that I was there. And I just really learned so much more about the art of it. She's someone, and I believe it now more than ever, like one of the main things that your knowledge should be strong on is producers. And if you can know producers and know them vintage to vintage, that's such a tool in your arsenal. I didn't really see it at the time, but I see it now, because the two wines we have beside us here are two great examples of that. So, and I just kind of learned so much more about understanding wine and understanding. There was a great, the senior kind of sommelier there was a guy named Claudio Loy, and he was one of the first people to really pull me aside and like teach me a couple of things. You know, he was someone that really made me understand that the first thing you should really start to understand about certain wines and varietals is styles, because then once you understand styles, you can really go into it a bit more. And pretty much like it is in every wine region now, there's like two sides to the fence. You know, it's like it's like Barolo or it's like Rioja or whatever, where it's like old world versus new world within a world, so to speak. Sure. Had a blast there. Still really wanted to hammer into fine dining, and I ended up joining the Savoy Grill about 18 months later. That was a pretty incredible experience. Like, to have a list of regulars like the ones I had, like, who says they get to serve Tom Jones every Saturday night? So it was a pretty incredible experience. So much fine wine open there, such an amazing dining room, and then it was really fun because I got to a point where we were a bit short on staff and etc. on different parts of the group. So at one point I was actually dotting between Petrus, which is their 1 Michelin star in Knightsbridge, and Restaurant Gordon Ramsay, their 3 Michelin star on Royal Hospital Road. And that was an amazing boost for my confidence, because having that, I then got to the stage where I had the ability of, I had 3 different menus and 3 different wine lists in my head. And I was able to walk in and carry out service in any one of them. And it kind of made me go, look at you doing stuff. Just kind of bringing it to the next level and really starting to see results from all the hard work I've put in. So I had an amazing time there. Wanted to go higher position-wise, but there just wasn't much movement at the time. And then all of a sudden, I was on LinkedIn one day and I seen a thing about this guy named Adam Handlin. And I was like, I watched his season of MasterChef. I was like, that guy's really good. And then it was like, he's opening a restaurant in Covent Garden. And I was like, okay, cool. So this sounds pretty wicked. And I looked it up and I got in touch with Sean Hamilton, who was the then group GM, a really good friend of mine. He said, yeah, we're doing this project. He said, so if you can come meet us, we have a cafe near Liverpool Street. So you meet myself and Kelvin McCabe, who's the wine director. And I was like, Kelvin McCabe is doing this. I was like, okay, cool. I was like, I've heard of this guy. So, yeah. And then I joined, and then we just went in and did it, and we tackled it from the ground. Like, we were the first 2 sommeliers to ever work for that company. And we tackled it head on, and we tackled the place in the old Truman Brewery, and then we did Covent Garden, and we did a lot together. He's besides Liz, he's probably the most important person in my story. I wouldn't be where I am now without him. Like, he's my Yoda, except he loves sake and DJs. I came up with this idea when I started there, that I said, this guy has got insane experience, he's got insane knowledge, like, he's literally the ultimate all-rounder. And I said to myself, every day I'm going to ask him one question, just about anything, whether it be a producer, whether it be about buying, whether it be about invoicing, whether it be about whatever. So every day I'd ask him one question, and he'd give me answers to 25. Because the thing about him is, it's never one conversation about him, it's always this membrane just connects one thing to another and we go all the way. Like, the end of service on a Saturday night, our only day off would be Sunday. We'd be working 6 doubles when we open the restaurant, the 2 of us together. So on Saturday night, we'd probably open a bottle of something nice, and then we'd get into that conversation. It'd start about invoices, then it started about producers, then about picking lists.
Then it was the day off.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. There was no Sunday. And then it goes into Arsenal, then it goes into music, and then there's this blur. And that's the way it is. And by the time I left Adam Handlin, I just kind of so I had 2 stints there. I left after a while. I just needed a break because I had a really intense kind of year and a half, and I was also of the mindset that I really wanted to do as much different type of work in wine, in terms of, fine dining, casual, semi-casual, all that kind of stuff. So somehow managed to get in touch with the guys at Antidote, and I don't know how that happened, but I ended up going working there for just under a year and had a really good time. Like, it was so cool to learn about natural wine, because that is an absolutely booming part of the industry at the moment. And somewhere like there, that's a real kind of originator in terms of doing something like that. Probably themselves, and Terroir is probably another one. And just being able to work there, get to meet producers, is a very, very cool thing. And I think one thing I definitely learned there was, especially having relationships with producers, is a really humbling, but also a really important thing. Because I suppose as well, you know, maybe not in the natural wine world, but kind of more in the world of, we'll say, more like fine wine, and kind of more, you know, 3 zeros rather than 2. You know, the producer will always hear good news. They'll always go, oh, your wine's on the list here, 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 and here. Oh, that's fantastic. But they mightn't have sold any. Whereas this morning I met the sales guy from Head High, and I told him we've done about 90 bottles in 3 weeks. And he was like, that is ridiculous. And I said, yeah. And I said, there's about 200 left, and we're probably going to do all that too. And he was like, pff. So to have that relationship and be able to sit down and tell them, this is what's happening, that's a really, really great thing. I left there. Kelvin called me literally like 5 minutes after I left Antidote. Like, it was ridiculous. I had just left Antidote. I told no one. And I got a phone call. He was like, hey, what are you doing? And I was just about to draw a breath. But what can I do for you? So he was like, need to take Covent Garden to the next phase. We're opening a hotel in Chelsea. We're moving to a new site in Hoxton for the original Frog site. So he said, I need some help. So I said, cool. Went back there. That was fun. That was really relaxing. And especially the whole natural wine thing was a very fish out of water experience for me. So to go back somewhere where I was very much felt loved and appreciated was amazing. So I had a really amazing time going back there. And it was nice to just not have to worry about the next job or like they brought me back, and you know, I was doing the hours, but I was making good money and serving great wine and creating great experiences for people. So that was the really important thing. So then, this is where it kind of connects a bit. So when I started doing that little tour de force around all the fine dining sites in Gordon Ramsay, that was via Alex, who was my operations manager at Gordon Ramsay, and he had just joined GRH, Goodman's holding company, and he is good friends with my brother. They went out one night, and he said, what's Shane doing? He said, oh, he's just back at Adam Handlin. He's just you know, enjoying himself, you know, kind of a thing. He said he really wants to wait for the next thing and make sure that whatever the next move he makes is right. Because I thought, this is a really pivotal time for me. The next choice I make is going to be really important. And he said, okay. So he got in touch with me and said, listen, I need some help at Goodman. Our wine buyer is leaving, and we're just trying to figure out the moving parts here. He said, I really want to take Goodman to the next phase and just give it a bash. So I said, yeah, cool, why not? And I started, that was July 2019. And I started here in the Canary Wharf restaurant that we're sitting in right now. Yeah. And totally different to anything I've ever done before in terms of service in London. However, unbelievably familiar, because it's a very American style of service. So having worked in New York, I just kind of, it was as easy as falling into bed at night. So once I got in there, it was a good few months, and the higher-ups in the company kind of wanted to figure things out. In February of 2020, I was made wine buyer and group head sommelier for the 3 Goodman sites, which was pretty incredible. I went through all of that until this year, where I was then promoted to group wine buyer for the entire GRH company. So my 2 first years as a buyer have been really fascinating, because last year I wasn't allowed to buy anything, and this year for me there's nothing to buy. So it's just it's a really weird experience. It's just, no, last year was an unbelievable learning curve, like unbelievable, like in terms of just learning how to be smart in terms of, you know, your stock and your costs and all of that kind of stuff, without in any way jeopardizing the experience the guest is getting. So I ended up having to take over the Mayfair site and manage the rest of the group as well. So it was a pretty strenuous year. So then jumping in and out of lockdowns, all of that kind of stuff, very stressful, but a massive period of growth for me, which is, I think, is why it ultimately led to me to where I am now, and in particular, Helen Butland, who's our now operations director, her belief in me has brought me to where I am today. So she's changed my life. From the moment we met, did you ever meet someone where it's just like you instantly like each other, you instantly have respect for one another, just so easy, and we just seen eye to eye from day one. And when something like that happens, it's just so much easier. And she tested me and she monitored me until she was fully of the belief of, right, this is the guy. And it's kind of brought me to where I am today. So yes, I've been buyer for the group now for nearly 4 months, which has been pretty amazing. It's been overwhelming, it's been very intense, but again, a massive learning curve. So I'm really fascinated to see how things will be for me by the end of the year, in terms of last year was what it was, and that was just for the Goodman sites. This year is now for 5 restaurants in total for the entire group. So I'm interested to see how kind of things pan out, because it seems pretty certain we're going to be staying open. So to get that underneath our belts and then to be able to start 22 afresh, we had a lot of big plans for the group in general. So to be able to get the rest of the year under our belts and then start fresh in 2022 to be able to do exactly what we want to do is pretty cool.
That for me was so interesting because you basically have condensed, as you say, that sort of nearing sort of 15-year career starting at the age of 13. You've condensed all of that down into the sort of 15-20 minutes there, and it's so interesting actually as well to hear you mentioning some former guests of Interpreting Wine, specifically Laura Patry and Kelvin McCabe, as being huge influences on you. So I've always stayed in touch with them. I've always got a lot of respect for both of them, among all of the other sommeliers that I've interviewed in the history of the podcast. So it's great to sort of hear some former guests getting a bit of a shout out. And I think in classic style, what I'd really, I guess, kind of take you back to is really maybe to zoom out a bit from where you are. We've gone sort of blow by blow almost through your journey. But if we kind of take a step back and then look at, what is GRH and get that sort of perspective, I think that will be a great place to again kind of zoom back into where we are today.
Yeah. Goodman is really interesting. So we're going back to the financial crisis. So that was Goodman Mayfair opened in 2008, and then City followed around 2011, and this site, Canary Wharf, was around 2013 if I'm not mistaken, but all within that ballpark. So a load of Russian lads opening an American steakhouse in Mayfair during the financial crisis is just the classic recipe for success. I'm sure you'll agree, Lawrence. It started off, and the wine list originally, to look at it from that perspective, was a little bit more along the natural wine route originally. So, because that was a real kind of startup point for that time. And then after a while, there was just some really influential people in the company at that time who's really laid the groundwork for where we are today. So Dave Strauss is one of them, who was our operations director for many, many years. He managed some of the best steakhouses in New York and really brought that American aspect to it. Crispin Sugden has managed and been sommelier of, I think, almost all of the sites here. And he was the one that actually he was the one, along with another guy called Joe Pelosi, who almost not made the switch but started pushing more towards the California thing. So he was coming into contact with some people. There's 2 wines we have here in front of us which are from those 2 suppliers, those 2 people. One of them is Rory Benham, the other one is James Hockin, and via them they created this undeletable footprint of California wines, which is why we're synonymous to them to this day and still doing absolutely amazing work, and also why I also work with them the 5 minutes I'm not working at the restaurants. So that was really, really important, and a really important period of growth. And then Helen Butland, who I mentioned already, she is now our operations director, but she actually started as general manager of Goodman Mayfair. And she was general manager, and then she moved on to operations, and now she's the head of the company. So we're really indigenous. the first thing we do is try and see what talent we can use and develop and bring to the next level. And one of the plans we kind of have for 22 specifically on the wine is I want to create an almost kind of I don't know, like a La Masia of wine kind of a thing. So, you know, kind of won't be quite like the Barcelona Youth Academy, I don't think, but just to be able to create as much talent within so that we don't have to look without. So having a lot of people, I have sommeliers on each site, so one for each Goodman site, and I have people within them that will be training into like kind of a wine captain role, which is very common in the United States. So someone that's a good backup on a busy night, but then someone that can also be there when the sommelier can't be in. And then just training as many people as possible to kind of get into that. So just empowering people and giving them knowledge and, you know, giving them the opportunity, because Helen gave me the opportunity and look what I've done. So, and the same goes for Phil Campbell, who's our executive chef for the group. He started off as the head chef at Goodman Mayfair. He became the head chef for Beast. And then he moved on and he's now the executive chef for the group, and that is kind of what we're all about. We try and do, you know, as well as we can. So Goodman is well established. We were having a look earlier at the knives. So we have a knife holder program, which I think is such a cool thing. Basically, if you come 50 times or more, become one of our best regulars, you get your own engraved knife that you get given to you every time that you come in, which I think is such a cool and such a unique thing. It's such a great... there's something very, I don't know, something very symbolic about it as well. I just think it's a really fantastic thing. And one of the things is, you know, if there is any regulars listening, thanks to every single one of them, because God knows they were the ones that kept us going after we opened. Because as soon as we opened the bookings, so we opened the bookings a week earlier for them, before anybody else, and they just booked to high heaven, because at that point we didn't know, like, are we going to be open for a month, 2 months, 3 months? We have no idea. And you could see just like these bookings dotted in. It was like a weird game of snakes and ladders, where it was just like bookings dotting in from each one, and it was kind of like, you know, knife holders going, yeah, I'm going to be in town that day, so I'm going to book in to come. So that's the really cool thing about it. So Goodman is the real feather in the cap. And then, but not to take it away from Zelman and Beast, because they're two really cool concepts as well. So Zelman Meats is kind of like the cooler younger brother of Goodman, so a little bit more casual, a little bit more street style, a little bit more funky on the wine front. Still very focused on beef like we are at Goodman. Goodman is primarily US and UK beef. But there's some from a bit further afield for Zelman, so you'd have stuff from Canada, Australia, a bit from Uruguay. So we do a really cool taster plate where you can do like a little bit of everything. So really cool, great drinks as well and great cocktails. And then Beast is our fine dining outlet, which serves insanely high quality beef from pretty much anywhere that's good that produces it, and also Norwegian king crab. I think we're the only restaurant, definitely in the United Kingdom anyway, that serves it. It's a pretty spectacular creature and also pretty expensive, and we have them all in-house. They take about 10 years to fully grow and develop before we can actually serve them in the restaurants, so it's a fair rarity. And then a fabulous wine list that Gabriele has written there, and Giulio, his second in command. Those guys are doing an amazing job. And it's the cool thing about it is that no matter who you eat with, you're part of the family. And, you know, if there's some days if you just want to keep it chill, you can go to Zelman. If some days you just want to, you know, spend a little bit more and just be looked after, come to Goodman. And if you want to go heavy hitting, come to Beast. So it's a really fantastic little family. They all operate in their own little ways, all very different. That's why it's so fascinating for me on the wine front. And going back to pretty much all the people I mentioned before, like when I mentioned Kelvin, when I mentioned Laure, people like that, especially Kelvin, one of his best abilities was, you know, at that point when we had a restaurant in Shoreditch, we had a restaurant in Covent Garden, and we had a restaurant in Chelsea, which are three about as different locations for a restaurant. And the fact that we'd be able to sit down at a table with a load of wines, and then he'd just be able to go through it and go, yeah, that'll be great for Shoreditch, that'll be great for Chelsea, we'll do this by the glass in Covent Garden. So that's another skill I kind of picked up off him, because I'll go to tastings and I'll pick stuff up, and people will be saying to me, this will be great for Goodman, and I was actually thinking, no, this will be great for Beast. Yeah, this will be Rockstar. I'll be thinking about the food there, and the same goes for Zelman as well, and also the staff as well, because the staff, I think that's what I love about the homely atmosphere of all the restaurants, is we get a lot of, what's your favourite? What do you love? And we did a fairly big expansion on the wine lists at Zelman. I'm trying to give it a little bit more kind of a Southern Hemisphere influence, just to kind of have it as almost like a contrast to Goodman and Beast, because obviously we're all about, California, Bordeaux, Burgundy, Rhone, Italy, that kind of stuff. So to have that contrast, I think, is really cool and just kind of really signifies the brand. And since we've done that, the biggest selling wines have been those, because those are the ones that all the guys love at Zelman and Harvey Nichols. So, people will say to them, what do you like? And that's the kind of stuff they push. So, I'm extremely fortunate to be part of a family such as this, because our motto is great steak, great people, great wine. That's what we're about. The people part being I should have said that first, because that is the most important part, because the way the people get looked after here is really, phenomenal. The way I've been looked after is phenomenal. So, and if you do that, guess what? They give great service. So, it's simple, back to basics style hospitality. And I think that's what I like most about it. So, we're very fortunate, yeah.
Yeah, I love the way that you've kind of, drawn out, I think, and made the connections between those different sites. And I think the thing that comes to mind for me really is, you as group wine buyer for, what are quite different potentially wine lists and potentially quite different customers as well. How does the training come through for the staff that mean that, again, they're able to kind of go up to that table at Beast, or go up to the table at Zelman, or go up to that table at Goodman and help the customer choose the right wine for their experience?
The basic formula is to keep it personable and keep it random. I never do the same thing when it comes to training. I'm very spontaneous. I have a nice reputation around the group, I think, especially at Goodman, because sometimes someone will say something and go, oh, I've never tried that, and I'll just open it, and then we'll try it. So it's kind of like, oh, Uncle Shane and his corkscrew are in town. Let's get on this. Because there's so many different ways of doing it. Like, I just try and be as interactive as possible. I tailor it per site. I do. I look over the trains, but I make sure that it's the guys that are on the floor there every day that's doing the bulk of it. I'll be there as well, just to kind of add in clef notes here and there. But it's very tailored towards site. But I try and think of something different, every single time. Like, one of the new things I did, which I thought was a massive bunch of fun, was, so I changed the entire by the glass program. So we do 3 sparklers, a rosé, 10 whites, 12 reds, poured by the glass, which is separate to our Corvan program. And that's a lot to take in. And I've done training sessions where I've gone through it, pour, taste, pour, taste, pour, taste. And I just thought, man, this isn't working. Because they're coming up to me 2 weeks later and going, do we do this by the glass? And I'm like, oh, man. So what I did was, I made sure that I was on, like, towards the end of the day. So what I did was, I went in that middle part of the restaurant there, I took 3 or 4 tables and I put them together. I opened the wines and I lined them up and I stood behind the table. So I did it like a portfolio tasting. So the notes would be on the table, they'd have their notes in the hand, they'd come up and I pretty much just said, start asking me questions or I'm going to shout at you. And they followed suit, thank God. And by doing that, by interacting, they learned so much. And there was a fantastic atmosphere there, because they were all talking to each other going, do you like this? I like this. Did you like that? I don't like that. Try this with this, and all of that kind of thing. So stuff like that. And then also when we did the menu changed, in terms of the starters and the sides that we do, that changed substantially before we opened. Phil and his team put together a pretty cool menu there. So as soon as dishes were coming out, I'd come with a bottle and go, try this. And they'd go, from the stuff that's by the glass. And then we had a conversation of why it works. And then we'd have a conversation about, if we did this wine, why doesn't it work? So just a real kind of insight in terms of food and wine pairing. Because I thought, so when I came here, I thought to myself, pairing wine with steak, that sounds a bit dull. And how wrong I was. I have never had so much crack pairing food with wine in my life. Like, I've done stuff like, we got in a really aged cut of something from Galicia, and they cut it as a sirloin. It was like 120 days aged, and the flavour profile in it was off the hook. And the guest asked me, any bottle of wine, we'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
What are you going to pair with it? And I gave them a bottle of vintage champagne rosé, and they went bananas, and I went bananas because they let me try it as well, and they were like, you're a genius. But like, it also makes you think, because, you know, this is what me and you study, is wine, and kind of how it gets from the vine to where it's sitting in our glasses right now. But also in terms of the meat, like our farmers up in the Lake District and in Nebraska, they're actually so detailed to the point where they're actually making certain cows graze on certain types of grass, because that will give the ultimate flavour profile. So then I need to put my money where my mouth is and then find something to pair with it. It's a really fascinating process. So also training guys on that in terms of how to pair red meat and wine. It's a particularly impressive thing with guests, because obviously at Goodman we're dealing with UK and US stuff. US stuff is corn-fed, so it's going to be predominantly more rich, more creamy, more buttery kind of style, whereas the UK stuff is all grass-fed, so it's going to be more textured, it's going to be more earthy, it's going to be more intense. So, by rule of thumb, you're more than likely going to be pairing an old world wine with American meat and vice versa, because of if you have the fruit profile of a new world wine, especially hot climate, hot vintage, and you pair it with US meat, it's a touch over the top. And then there's the other leaner equals lighter rule, where you're doing a lighter bodied style of wine with a cut of meat that has less fat content. But then again, that depends, because, you know, just like we taste wines every week about, you know, what's drinking well, la la la, Phil and his team will come in and they'll cook something and he'll bring it out and go, this is tasting like superb. Yeah. Like this particular cuts that we got down is off the chain. Like at the minute, we just got down some belted Galloway, and that is unbelievable. I ate here a while ago and I had some, and it was pretty spectacular. So I went a bit roundabout there, I'm sorry. But it's basically about just keeping it informal, keeping it personable. I want to take the stuffiness away from wine as much as I can. And ultimately, if there's any message I want to put out there, we talked about it off recording there a second ago. Anyone can do this. Whatever creed or consequence you are, you can do this. Anyone can do this. If you're willing to put in the work, you will go to heaven high and above. And I think as well, you know, even on the restaurant floors here, we make sure that our staffs don't refer to our wine people as sommeliers. We make sure we say our wine guy, or just something casual, because then that takes away the formal aspect. Yeah. Because, you know, sitting down and reading a wine list anyway is a real fantastic study in social psychology in many ways. So being able to take away that not intimidation, but that unnecessary pressure one puts upon themselves, it just makes it better. So training our guys to be able to convey that is the ultimate goal, and the key to it is keep it casual, and just to do it in different ways, whether it's setting up a portfolio style tasting, whether it's cracking open a bottle or two, sometimes during service, sometimes at the end of service, sometimes at the start of service. And then other things, like another thing we did when we came back is we did Old World and New World comparisons. So we sat down, we tasted Chardonnay, Sauvignon, Cab, Malbec and Pinot, and we did it side by side and say, hey, what's the difference? Let's go back to brass tacks, because we've all been sitting at home and we've all finished Netflix 9 times over, so now we need to come back and do our jobs. And so this is kind of a really good way of doing it. So I'm trying to think out of the box as much as I can when it comes in terms of training, because the more inventive we can be and the more off-piste we can be, the more it'll stick in the memory.
I think that's a really interesting answer for me, because it's like you're using some of what are basically the most traditional elements of how wine is sold and how people get to taste wine, that portfolio tasting. I love that sort of that image and that turn of phrase you use there, where you basically just set up a portfolio tasting in the restaurant. I think that's such a brilliant way to do it. But I think also then bringing in the beef element as well. I think we, as you say, we can look at an area that's not maybe our own sort of, an area that we will geek out about, and we can just think, oh, okay, it's going to be easy, or it's going to be straightforward to pair. But when you get those true artisans, whether it's in beef, whether it's like in cheese or truffles or fruits, when you get somebody that is just completely nuts about what they do, they know all of those different elements and basically all those different levers that they've got to play with in the production. As you say, I love the image, grazing the cow on that spot there to get what they need to give them that flavour. And it's like there's a whole, broad area that basically, your chefs here, that's where they super geek out on, right? And that they know all of those things. And I think it's where you bring that together with experts on the wine side of things. I think for somebody who's underneath that, that's just sounds like a really exciting kind of place to be. And I just think that was just really what kind of brought it all home together there for me. It's like you it's going to change presumably as well through the year as well. There's going to be seasonality as you go through. So yeah, it feels like no 2 days are ever going to be the same for you or for any of the staff here. As I always say during these situations, we've been like super restrained here. We've had 2 glasses on the table here looking at us, and I just think that I'm really enjoying the conversation, and I just think that building on all of what you've shared today, I think what's exciting for me is to look at where that really kind of comes together directly into a couple of wines, and really 2 wines that I've given you pretty much free rein with choosing from the wine list. So I think, in whatever way makes the most sense, please just tell us a little bit about why you chose these wines, and then, tell us the story, and we'll obviously get to taste them as well.
Yeah, well, that's the most important bit, isn't it? Well, thanks for your kind words. I do appreciate it, because I love the show, so it's wicked. You know what? These wines are a no-brainer for 2 very different reasons. So we'll start with the head high, the Pinot. So that's on your left. Yeah. So this is... I think what is impressive about this is that if you were given this blind and then someone told you it's from California, they'd go, really? No way. So this is Head High 2018 Sonoma County Pinot Noir. So Head High is a side project of another winery which is called Three Sticks. Three Sticks is owned by Bill Price III, who also owns Kistler. So this is a side project that was started quite a while back. Head High is the most recent project. So Three Sticks is made by... is his name Bob Calder? Is that his name? I can't remember. He was the winemaker from at Williams Sellium from 1998 until 2014. And the Head High project was started in 2015. The winemaker for that is a lady named Britt Richards, and she is seriously talented. And she used to work for Philippe Melka, who makes pretty much every single expensive wine in California. So it's a pretty good breeding ground for training. So Three Sticks was actually originally started because obviously they own the Durrell Vineyard in Sonoma, and a couple of other really well known ones, and they wanted to create a separate wine that just shows the personification of what great fruit tastes like. So this is one of the most sustainable wines made in Sonoma at the minute. All fruit, done in stainless steel and then bottled. It's about stainless steel for a month and then it's bottled. And then it's picked in kind of more cooler parts Sonoma County, and it's just really fabulous because, funny enough, I was talking to their sales guy this morning. I had a lovely meeting with him and Chris from the Wine Treasury, and he was telling me that they purchased or they got a hold of some land in Russian River, but ultimately decided to not use the fruit because it wasn't the kind of style of wine that they wanted to produce. Because as we all know, if you're looking specifically at Russian River, you're getting that more really bright, high-toned, almost jammy style red fruit compote / jam characteristic, whereas this, for me, just the general Sonoma that they pick from cooler sites just brings that more kind of like red cherried fruit, and it's more bright and more vibrant and more pretty, and it has a lovely little touch of minerality to it as well. So I think the reason I chose this one first and foremost is to show, like, California is about as diverse as it's ever been, you know. Because here we're looking at Napa and Sonoma, which are the two jewels in the crown. But then if you're thinking about other places like Lodi, you instantly think is Infidel. But Lodi now grows more grape varietals in that AVA than anywhere else in California. There's over 350 varietals alone grown in Lodi at the minute, and they're producing everything from an Albarino, which I do by the glass here, from a great producer called Oak Farm, to they also make Barbera and Sangiovese. So the diversification is pretty incredible. So this is also on our promotion while I'm on it. The California Wine Institute are very keen on growing their presence in the on-trade in Europe by about 30% by the year 2030. So a bit of a 30 for 30. That's for you sports fans out there. And one of the ideas we came up with, I do a bit of side work with them. Justine and Damien are two of the most incredible, lovely and chilled out people you could ever want to work for. I've been helping them create content and do some other kind of things. So the whole the journalism box has been ticked, which I never thought would happen. So they've made that dream come true. So I'm in their debt eternally. And one of the things we said we do is do a little promotion, because it's so funny how things come together. Because there is loads of movement, there was loads of new wines coming over, there's some new vintages, some new cuvées, some were with different importers, some with new winemakers, and I actually sat down before they even approached me about this, and I said I could almost write a separate list of kind of like what's going on in Napa Valley, kind of a thing. And then once they came to me, I said, we'll go with it. So we're doing a selection of 10 wines from about 8 different importers, 8 of my main importers. All the wines are available by the glass via the Coravan system, and also available by the bottle. And the hook to it all is I'm doing everything on a bit of inside baseball. I'm doing it all on cash margins. So I'm not doing any GP. I don't really care about making money on these. I'm about getting people drinking California wines. And I'm so happy to say that it's been a phenomenal success. Like, it's just been unbelievable. And again, talking about those relationships, like I was able to tell the guy from Head High today, 90 something bottles in a couple of weeks, there's 200 left, we're probably going to cane through all those before the end of October. So to be able to say that to somebody is just, it's really great. So
yeah, cool.
Yeah, cheers. Another thing that's quite interesting as well in terms of the project itself is because the Price family own all of these prestigious vineyards in Sonoma. They make predominantly single vineyard wines. And for one of their cuvées for 3 Sticks, and also this one for Head High, it's an opportunity to the winemaker to show her skill, to be able to blend things together and just make it work. And it's all about just showing the level of quality of the fruit. And I think it really, really stands out in this wine. Really stands out.
This is super interesting to me, actually, because I think it does all of those things that you've mentioned there, but I think also it is very approachable, but it's also, I think, been interesting food wine as well, because I think, maybe just that minerality, maybe just the fruit turned down a little bit on this as well. So getting more of the sort of minerality and tasting slightly more of the sort of, I guess, the more umami kind of flavors coming through. And I'm just curious then, given what you've spoken about in the last part, talking about those pairings, is there a particular sort of time or type of beef that you sort of think you go to when you think about this wine, or vice versa? You see that dish on the menu and you think about this wine in particular.
What are the so we're for the UK stuff, we've gone so into it and so nerded out on it that we're focusing on a couple of breeds. So Longhorn, Shorthorn, Belted Galloway, and Blue Grey. And for me, Belted Galloway, like I said earlier, is tasting really well at the minute. But Blue Grey is like, for me, is like the DRC of meat from the Lake District. And we got a couple of bone-in ribeyes of those, and just the intensity of flavour. The char that it gets from being cooked in the Josper grill, which is hotter than hell. The richness of the meat, the earthy character. I guess it's... you know what connects it? Is the umami. It's the umami character that you get from that meat. Because I get that so much more than I get from the Shorthorn, the Longhorn, or the Belted Galloway. Because the Belted Galloway for me is a bit more luscious, and then Longhorn's a bit more intense, and then Shorthorn is just a touch more toned down. So I think that's what the connection is here between the two. And just that bright fruit characteristic just really kind of jumps into it as well. But it's such a... This wine as well, it's such a chameleon. Like, obviously we're all about steak and stuff, but we have an amazing fish supplier who we've started working with after lockdown. And we do weekly specials that we get off them, fresh catches that are brought in every morning. And a couple of weeks ago we were doing bone-in halibut. And I tried it with this, and it was off the scale. Like, off the scale. So... yeah, I suppose that's another thing. When it's a tool in the arsenal like that, when it has such flexibility, it's a comfort, isn't it? So next one is this wine. For a long time I used to flip and flop and fly when someone asked me what my favourite producer is, but this is my favourite producer and it has been for a long time. So this is Pilcrow, which is... It's such a special wine. It's such a special place, and most importantly, Jonah and Sarah are such special people. I think when you have those three and it ties everything together, it's hard not to emotionally attach yourself to it in many ways. And the fact that I'm one of the only restaurants in the UK serving this is pretty amazing. So Sarah and Jonah Beer, both in the wine trade. Sarah has her own wine import company that she set up a couple of years ago after almost 15 years working for Duckhorn. Jonah started working back in the day. He started with Warren Wernarski at Stag's Leap, and then he moved on to Frog's Leap, where he worked his way up to vice president and was there until very recently. And he's now going to work full-time with his wife for the import company and sales for Pilcrow, which is a really, really cool thing. So Pilcrow is set up on the basis that... Pilcrow's set up on the basis of history. I'm fascinated with history, but I think my girlfriend said it to me once, where she said that I'm only fascinated by the history of things I'm interested in. So like the history of sports, the history of music, the history of food, the history of wine. And one of the bases that Pilcrow was set up on was that it's wines made in the fashion that they were back in the 60s, 70s and 80s, is when the wines really, really came to prominence. Because as we know, from, say, the late 80s to the mid-2000s, the red wines of California, particularly Cabernet Sauvignon that we're looking at here, went through a phase. We won't get into that, but today we're looking at something that's kind of made in that style. So something that's purposely picked, so it has a lower pH and a lower alcohol, but a higher acidity. Because that's what it was back in the day, like when Mondavi made his first vintage in 66 and he had those unicorn vintages in 74 and 78, he was looking at acidity, because acidity was prized back then, because the climate was completely different from the way it is now, as we all know. So they try and make it in that fashion. So the source of the fruit for the Cabernet Sauvignon comes from Yountville, and this is called the Ghost Block. Ghost Block is one of the coolest and most unique vineyards, I think, anywhere. So it's in the northern part of Yountville. It's in the north part. So you have the cemetery there in Yountville, which is where George Yount was actually, who the area is named after, is buried. And it's actually north of the cemetery, and I think you can almost see it if you get to the top of the hill. And the reason why it's called Ghost Block is because someone actually said that they'd seen the ghost of George Yount roaming the vineyards one time, so that's how it got the name. And Pilcrow are fortunate in the fact that the Hoxley family, who own the Ghost Block Vineyard, were allowed Pilcrow to put it on the label for the first time. That's never happened before. It's usually been inside baseball, but this is the first time that's been put on there. And like I said, it's this amazing amphitheatre, which is at the cusp of kind of a mountain range, which I think was once part of the Vaca, but kind of eroded a bit. And the soil composition is insane. Like, it's almost this kind of reddish soil, like decomposed. Like, when I talked to Jonah about it, like, Jonah said that the history of the soil goes back 170,000 years. The history of it is absolutely endless. But I'm lucky enough to taste a lot of California wines, American wines in general. And, you know, when you're talking about high level Cabernet Sauvignon, I think I do agree with the thing that people say that when you get a really high quality level of Cabernet Sauvignon, it should bring it through all the fruit profiles, to red, to blue, to black, to purple, whatever. And I do agree with that to a certain extent. However, when sometimes you find a wine that just has this really specific type of fruit and specific type of secondary and tertiary aromas, that's the draw in. That's what gets you. And in this instance, I really get it. Like, you know, in instance, we're looking at something that's... I looked at it earlier. What's the ABV on this? 13.8. Mm-hmm. Like, for a Cabernet Sauvignon from Yountville, that's pretty incredible. And as you'll find on the palate, the restraint that it has, the complexity, the layers of flavour, like, you get everything from... It has this weird mixture of almost kind of blueberry pie, fresh raspberry, slightly compoted, but then you have some lovely kind of earthy characteristics. You have that little bit of almost cocoa nib, that kind of like bitter outer casing of chocolate. Complexity, the depth, the acidity is there, which is exactly what we want. You don't feel any alcohol. It doesn't feel like there's any high glycerol content. To me, it's just one of those wines that feels special. Everything about it is special. And going back to the relationships thing, you know, I had an initial conversation on Instagram with, I think it was Sarah or Jonah, or both, I don't know. And they were like, oh yeah, James Hawken is bringing in the wine, and I heard you're working together now. And I said, yeah, I'll take a look at the wines. And I remember the first time I tried this, I just thought, wow. Yeah, and then to be able to tell them how well the wines are doing in the restaurants. And even, you know, during lockdown last year, they were sending me random messages here and there, checking if I was all right, checking if I was doing well, my family were okay. That's priceless, you know, that's absolutely priceless. So, yeah, so as you can tell, I have a real soft spot for this. Yeah, I think all we can do is drink it, right? just, I can stop talking.
Yeah. This is it. Yeah, let me take that from you. You obviously need two spare hands.
I'm done. Yes.
Oh, brilliant.
A cup of tea in the bill.
This is such an amazing experience tasting this wine, and it's taking me back to a way of describing wines that you know I do with wines that really you know have this impact. I think is just that where you get into sort of fine wine and get into wine that is really special, and you maybe think about opening the bottle. I characterize them by the information that you get. You know, I remember talking to a producer over in the Willamette Valley, and we tasted their kind of, you know, regional blend, the Willamette Valley blend, and that had, you know, fantastic flavour. It had the information that was there was very much centered on, you know, one type of fruit, or, you know, one type of rock, or, you know, it was very much sort of, you weren't getting the whole information because you were higher up. But when we stepped up into the single vineyard site, you're getting a sort of a cacophony of smells and tastes because you were stood right there in the vineyard, and that is the description that I would say for this wine. You've got the 3D nose, but then you've also got the 3D palate. It's taken you on that journey. It's given you all the information there, and it's just so great to taste it with somebody who's got that relationship with the producers, and you've made the connection between the wine in the glass and the people who actually got their foot on the soil and are making the wine.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's what it's all about, ultimately. Because, yeah, it's those memories we all create together. It lasts forever.
Have you been to?
Not yet.
These wineries?
Not yet. I had my first trip booked in last year, but it was cancelled due to unforeseen circumstances. Yeah. But please God, soon. I have a lot of people that I need to see and that have asked me. So, yeah, I definitely need to get there. It's all about soul, isn't it? It's all about, I think, showing the guest, especially when we go back to the hospitality element of what we're about. Yeah. It's about showing the guest that we're so careful about this, about who we pick, what we pick. Because, I don't know, we're appreciative towards you, you'll be appreciative towards us. I've had producers not be so appreciative and kind of write us off. Because the funny thing about us as well is that, and I suppose this is another thing with the buying side of it, is that we're a small to medium-sized restaurant group that trades like a large one because of the amount of volume that we do. The amount of covers we do, the amount of, which is calculated, but that's the way we operate. We're American style. We're hot and fast. And it's the way people like it. And the amount that people drink, the amount that people eat, it's serious volume, Again, going back to telling my importer and the gent from Head High to say this is how much we're actually going through, and they're kind of going, wow, because he told me I don't have any left at the winery because they sold it cellar door. So what you have in the UK, that's yours. Yeah. So that's the connection. I think, because I find this as well. When the word soul came into my mind because, especially when it comes to fine wine, and that's one of the most ultimately interesting things about us, in particular Goodman, and it's one thing I'm so fascinated by, is people that drink fine wine, people that own and drink fine wine, God bless them, how do they want to drink it? It's so weird that for such a luxury item, when people drink fine wine, they seek comfort. They want to go to Goodman and eat steak with it. They want to go somewhere really good and eat barbecue. They want to get a load of white burgundy and just hammer some sushi. That kind of a thing. It's so fascinating, and it's what I really, really love, because I've got people that come in and bring their own bottles and say, I want to drink this and eat in your restaurant. Cool. Do it. Do it. Because it makes us happy, doesn't it? It releases those endorphins in our brain that pleases us.
This is really cool. I'm loving this. This is a kind of, again, you're kind of coming around the hospitality sort of discussion, and I like the you sort of brought in people bringing in, because I noticed that you have, is it Mondays that you have sort of free corkage, or is that?
No, not in our restaurants. I did that when I was at Adam Handlin. Okay. We did that. Okay. We had free corkage on a Monday. Okay. Yeah. But I've thought.
Or is it you offered £20 corkage? Is that?
We do 30, but if you're a knife holder, we're a bit more lenient. And listen, if you're nice to me, if you just email me, Shane.McHugh@GoodmanRestaurants.com, say I've got a booking, can I bring a bottle? I'll sort you out. That's fine. It's just, don't show up and bring a load of fine wine and say, oh, is there a corkage policy? Come on, It's this is the thing. I kind of keep going around the hospitality circle a lot, because for the first time in the history of hospitality, last year we all stopped and had time to think. And to be in this industry, you need to be a little bit off. So the fact that we all had time to sit down with limitless quantities of food and wine to think was dangerous. I think that was just as dangerous as the virus in many ways. So we all had time to think, and I think one of the things I thought about the most was my vocation. I know what my occupation is, I know what I am, but what do I want to be? When I'm done with this industry, when I retire aged 147, retire the corkscrew, what is the impact I want to have left on the industry? Because unfortunately now the industry is going through quite a difficult period from the perspective of staffing due to COVID-19 and due to the new laws in terms of going in and out, etc., due to the fact that there is some pretty unbelievable things coming to light in regards the way people are treated, whether that be by their sex or their colour of their skin, and it all being excused of being part of the culture. So this is now the time for us to rebuild. This is the time for us to really take a look at what we're doing and try and, like you said, entice more people in. Like you said on Kelvin's episode, he was talking about, English people, that this is a career. You can come and do this. So in my vocation, what I want to do, I just want to be someone that helps, that gives people a chance, that, anybody can come to me, whether you're a supplier or whether you're not, whether you work for me or you don't. Come and get me. Come and find me. Social media, if you need anything, give me a shout. That's ultimately the mark I'd like to leave on this industry for me. So, because I had 7 or 8 months to think about it. So, that's the thing. So, I suppose, in essence, I'm kind of going around... I suppose I think about... It's weird, even though I have my job title, I think about hospitality first before I think about wine. Mm-hmm. Because you can't have the former... You can't have the latter without the former. So, I think that's why, in many ways. But I think the moral to this story is... It's a good thing that I'm back on the floor because it means I stopped thinking. Right? So yeah, that's all I'll say about that.
Thank you so much, Shane. It was an absolute pleasure to sit down with you on the day. And those are the episodes that I've truly missed. Just sitting down, getting into your story with a couple of cool glasses of wine in front of us. I've left below the website for Goodman Restaurant Group, and from there you can find all of their main social media handles for the sites. And of course, I'd love to have you following along with me on social media, where I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, at Wine Podcast on Twitter, and email hello@interpretingwine.com. Next time on the Interpreting Wine London Somm Special series in episode 456, I'll be speaking with Alice Ward, General Manager at Tap and Bottle in London Bridge. See you then.